welcome back, folks! Aha! You are doing good progress! After this chapter, one more chapter left. Hooray! So as you know, in this series, we are covering PM Body of Knowledge, 6th edition. Without any delay, let's continue to Chapter 11, Project Risk Management.
Hey there. Have you ever poured your heart into planning something significant, maybe a grand community festival, or designing a new learning platform for your school, maybe even just organizing a major family event, and then suddenly, bam, an unexpected challenge just pops up?
Happens all the time.
Right. Perhaps the venue you book suddenly doubles its price, or a key volunteer gets sick right at the last minute.
Ugh, yeah. The worst timing.
It feels like the universe just loves throwing a curveball when you least expect it. But what if you had a hidden advantage, like a strategic superpower?
Ooh, I like the sound of that.
Yeah. To not just survive these surprises, but actually navigate them with confidence, maybe even turn them into something, even better.
Okay, I'm listening.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into exactly that strategic superpower, project risk management.
What's really fascinating here, I think, is that every project, whether it's like a massive infrastructure undertaking, building a new highway maybe, or something really personal like planning your future studies, it inherently comes with its own unique set of uncertainties. It just does.
Yeah, you can't avoid it.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really extract the most important insights from the sources we've gathered and help you understand that these surprises aren't just obstacles to be feared.
Right.
They are a natural, unavoidable part of any unique endeavor. We'll explore a systematic but also, flexible way to manage them, so you're not just reacting all the time.
Firefighting.
Firefighting, exactly. But proactively shaping your project's destiny, always staying one step ahead. It's really about transforming those potential threats into incredible opportunities and ultimately ensuring your success.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit then. So, at its core, project risk management. It isn't about having a literal crystal ball, right? You can't actually predict the future.
No, sadly not.
Instead, it's more like having a well-honed intuition maybe, and a strategic toolkit, something that allows you to anticipate what might happen.
Both good and bad.
Both good and bad, yeah. And then actively shape your response to it. So if your school project is building a detailed model of the Taj Mahal, let's say.
Okay. Ambitious.
Ambitious, yeah. It's not just about gathering materials and, starting the construction. It's about thinking, what could go wrong with the delicate carving? What if a specific material isn't available?
Supply issues?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And critically, what amazing things could happen? Like maybe you discover a new technique or you get extra resources you weren't expecting.
Right. How can we make the most of that?
Exactly. How do we leverage that? So it's fundamentally about making sure your project succeeds by planning for and adapting to all these uncertainties.
And it has a dual aim, right?
Yeah.
You want to boost the positive surprises, which we call opportunities, and you want to strategically soften the blow of the negative ones, the threats. The real insight here, I think, is realizing that effective risk management transforms a project from just, reactive firefighting.
Putting out fires constantly.
To strategic foresight.
Right.
Thinking ahead.
That's a great way to put it. Strategic foresight.
Exactly. Think of it like a professional cricket team preparing for a high-stakes match. They don't just walk onto the field hoping for the best, do they?
Definitely not. Hours of planning.
Right. They engage in intensive strategy sessions. They think about every conceivable scenario. What if it starts raining mid-game? What if the opposition has a new, particularly strong bowler who bowls tricky deliveries?
Yeah, how do we counter that?
How do we counter that? How can we set the field, the batting order, to create opportunities to score big runs, maybe even hit some sixes, when the conditions are just right?
Seize the moment.
Seize the moment. Project risk management is that level of intelligent, forward-thinking strategy for basically any undertaking, from a small community event to a multi-core infrastructure project. It's about making deliberate choices, not just reacting to events as they unfold.
And you said any undertaking. Does that mean every single project has risks?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yes. All projects are inherently risky because, by definition, they are unique undertakings.
Okay.
Unlike routine operations, like, say, working on an assembly line where you do the same thing over and over, a project creates a unique product, service, or result.
Got it.
Imagine you're building a new house, maybe somewhere in India.
Yeah.
Even if you've built houses before, this specific house is different.
Sure. Different location, different design, maybe.
Exactly. There are always unknowns, like what kind of unexpected rock formation you might find when you start digging the foundation. you know? Or if the prices of essential materials like cement or steel suddenly skyrocket
Yeah, that happens.
due to unforeseen market disruptions or supply chain issues. Projects, by their very nature, operate under constraints. You've got limited money, tight deadlines, specific quality standards you have to meet.
Right, the triple constraint.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And they're built on assumptions, things you think are true, but which might turn out to be false.
Like assuming the weather will be good.
Exactly. Or assuming a key supplier will deliver on time.
Yeah.
And on top of all that, everyone involved, the architect, your parents footing the bill, the contractor might have different or even conflicting expectations for the final outcome.
Oh yeah, I can see that. The architect wants aesthetic perfection.
Right.
Your parents want it within budget and finished yesterday.
Exactly. So this raises a really important question. How do we balance taking on these inherent unknowns with making sure we actually build a strong, beautiful home that meets everyone's needs and budget?
That's the challenge.
It is. And the fundamental goal of taking these risks is actually to create value. It's about making controlled, intentional choices, balancing the potential for both positive and negative outcomes.
Okay.
Now, if these risks are left unmanaged, well, the consequences can be exponential. They can lead to significant delays, massive cost overruns that just dwarf the initial budget.
Yeah, blowing the budget completely.
Poor performance that compromises the project's whole purpose, or even severe damage to your reputation. Conversely, though, if opportunities are proactively managed and seized,
It's the good stuff.
the good stuff, they can lead to faster completion, maybe substantial cost savings, and much better, more innovative results. It's really the difference between a project spiraling out of control and one achieving, unprecedented success.
That makes perfect sense. So it's not just about avoiding problems, is it? It's also about actively seeking out those good surprises and leveraging them.
Absolutely key.
And it seems like there are, maybe two main ways to look at these uncertainties. Two levels of risk that we need to understand.
That's right. We generally talk about two levels.
Okay, so first we have what our sources call individual project risk. And this is an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, has a positive or negative effect on one or more specific project objectives.
Right. Keyword there is specific objectives.
Exactly. Things like the schedule, the cost, the quality, the scope, the resources, those core targets for your project. And this individual risk, it can be either an opportunity or a threat, right?
Correct. Positive or negative.
So for example, let's go back to your school's annual day play. A clear threat could be that the main actor for the play falls sick the day before the big performance.
Oh no. Nightmare scenario.
Total nightmare. That would definitely impact the quality of the performance and maybe even the schedule if you need to find a replacement quickly or worse, reschedule.
Yeah, huge impact.
But on the flip side, an amazing opportunity could be, say, a famous local celebrity suddenly offers to be the chief guest for free.
Wow. That'd be fantastic.
Totally. Fantastic for the event's reputation, audience turnout, maybe even fundraising. That's a positive risk and opportunity.
Makes sense. So that's the individual level. What's the other?
The other level builds on that.
Okay.
It's called overall project risk.
Right. The bigger picture.
Exactly. This isn't just about one specific event or condition, like the actor getting sick. It's the effect of all sources of uncertainty on the project as a whole.
Ah, okay. So it's cumulative.
It's cumulative, but also more than that. Our sources describe it as the riskiness of the entire project when you consider everything combined. That includes the collective impact of all those individual risks we talked about, but also those emergent risks that kind of arise from the interaction between individual risks and also the inherent variability and ambiguity just built into the project itself.
Okay, so it's not just adding up the small risks.
Not just adding them up. Think of individual risks, like specific potholes on a road you're building. Overall project risk isn't just the sum of those potholes, it's the inherent bumpiness of the entire road itself.
Ah, I like that analogy.
Yeah. It includes the general unevenness, the quality of the asphalt you chose, how much traffic it's really designed to bear.
Okay. The fundamental uncertainty.
Exactly. So, for your annual day, the overall risk is how likely the entire event is to be a success. Considering all the individual risks combined, actors, venue, weather, audience turnout, sound system, lighting, catering, security, everything.
Right. All interacting.
All interacting. And it also encompasses those broader uncertainties that aren't tied to a specific identifiable event. we'll touch on those more later, but which contribute to the project's fundamental level of uncertainty.
So it's about the total exposure, really, for everyone involved.
Yes. The total exposure to variations in the project, the final outcome, whether those variations are positive or negative, understanding this holistic view is crucial. Ignoring it is like trying to fix a complex machine by only looking at one loose screw.
Got it. That distinction really sharpens the picture. Individual risks versus the overall riskiness.
And it's not just a one-time check, is it? Like, you don't just plan for risks at the very beginning of the project and then, tick a box and forget about them.
Oh, absolutely not. That would be a recipe for disaster. Risks aren't static things.
Right, they change.
They continue to emerge. They evolve. They change in their impact and probability all the time, throughout the project's life. So project risk management has to be an ongoing, continuous process, not a one-off activity you do at the start.
Okay.
It's like checking the weather forecast daily for your cricket match. You wouldn't just check it once a week before, right?
No way, especially not during monsoon season.
Exactly. Or constantly monitoring the traffic on Google Maps on your way to school or work and adapting your route if there's a sudden jam. You need to keep an eye on things, adapt to new information, and make new plans as the project progresses. Continuously. This iterative nature is absolutely key to navigating the dynamic world of projects.
Okay, continuous vigilance. Makes sense.
And in order to manage risk effectively on a particular project, the project team needs a clear understanding of what level of risk exposure is acceptable.
Acceptable to who?
To the organization and to the key stakeholders involved. This brings us to two really important concepts that govern decision-making: risk appetite and risk thresholds.
Appetite and thresholds.
Your risk appetite is kind of like your personal philosophy on adventure. Are you a thrill seeker who loves extreme sports, bungee jumping maybe? Or do you prefer the comfort and safety of staying home with a good book?
Definitely the latter for me sometimes.
Right. So it's how much risk an organization or a person is willing to take on board to achieve a specific objective. For instance, if your parents are planning a family trip, maybe to a serene hill station like Shimla,
Nice.
their risk appetite might determine if they opt for a budget airline, which might have a higher risk of delays or less comfy seats, but costs significantly less.
Yeah, save some rupees.
Or a premium airline, which is more expensive but usually more reliable and comfortable. Their appetite reflects their general comfort level with uncertainty.
Okay, so appetite is the general feeling. What about thresholds?
Risk thresholds, on the other hand, translate that philosophy, that general feeling, into concrete, measurable boundaries.
Yeah, the specifics.
The specifics. They are the measurable levels of acceptable variation around a project objective that the organization is willing to tolerate. Think of them like speed limits on a road.
Okay.
If you go too fast, you risk a problem, an accident, a fine. Too slow, and you might miss your destination or arrive really late. So for your parents' family trip to Shimla, their threshold for a flight delay might be, say, 2 hours.
Right. Yeah.
Anything more than that. And it's a big problem for their plans because it would mess up their hotel booking or their onward travel arrangements. These thresholds need to be explicitly stated and communicated clearly.
Why is that so important?
Because it helps the entire team understand exactly what an acceptable level of risk is for that specific project objective. It ensures consistency in how risks are evaluated and responded to across the board. It's a really key part of smart, disciplined planning.
That's a really strong foundation. Now that we know what project risk management is and why it's so crucial, let's dive into the how. Our sources lay out 7 distinct yet interconnected processes.
7 steps.
Yeah, 7 steps. Think of them like the steps to making a perfect cup of chai. Each one is important, and they all flow together seamlessly to create something truly comforting and, well, effective.
Nice analogy. I like my chai strong.
Me too. So the very first step in this journey is plan risk management, setting the rules of the game. So for our school's annual day project, this is where we sit down before we even start thinking about specific things that could go wrong or right, and we say, okay, team, how are we generally going to approach risk for this event?
Right. What's our overall philosophy?
Exactly. We decide if we're a play it safe team, where every decision is really focused on minimizing potential downsides, or maybe we're a take calculated risks team where we're willing to embrace a bit of uncertainty for potentially bigger rewards, like maybe trying a new innovative performance idea.
High risk, high reward potentially.
Could be. So this process is all about defining how you will conduct risk management activities for your specific project. It's super important because it ensures that your efforts are proportionate, Not too much overkill, but also not too little attention.
Just right. Goldilocks principle.
Exactly. Just right for the project size, its complexity, and its overall importance.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't use the same level of detail for planning a small class presentation as you would for, say, building a new multi-story apartment complex in Mumbai.
No, definitely not. And this process, this planning, should ideally be completed quite early in the project lifecycle, often right after the project is officially chartered, to establish that framework right from the start.
So set it up early.
Set it up early.
Yeah.
But it's not rigidly set in stone either. You might need to revisit and adapt this plan if the project's scope or the environment it's operating in, or just the overall context changes significantly down the line.
Okay, so it can evolve.
It should evolve if needed. For instance, if your annual day suddenly expands from just a simple school play to include a full-scale musical with professional performers hired from outside,
Right, bigger scale.
then your initial, maybe quite simple, risk management approach will absolutely need to adapt to that increased complexity and the higher stakes involved.
Makes sense. So to set these rules, what kind of information do you need? What are the inputs?
To set these rules effectively, we look at several key inputs.
Right.
First, there's the project charter. Think of this as the official birth certificate of your project.
Okay.
It outlines the high-level description, the initial boundaries, the critical requirements, and sometimes it even mentions initial high-level risks that the project sponsor is already aware of.
Got it. The starting point.
Exactly. Then we have the broader project management plan. This contains all your other subsidiary plans, how you'll manage the schedule, the cost, the quality, resources, communication, procurement, and so on. Your risk management plan needs to be completely consistent and integrated with all of these other plans.
They all have to talk to each other.
They absolutely have to.
Right.
We also delve into other project documents, particularly the Stakeholder Register. This document is vital. It tells you who all the key people are who care about this project. Teachers, parents, students, maybe sponsors,
Right?
what their roles are, and, crucially, what their individual and collective attitudes towards risk are, their risk appetite and tolerance.
Why is that so important again?
Because, for example, some parents might be perfectly okay with a small delay for a school trip if it means a safer journey, while others might insist everything runs precisely on time no matter what, demanding absolute schedule adherence. Understanding their perspectives helps you determine how you'll manage risks and how you'll communicate about them effectively.
Okay, managing expectations.
Precisely. We also consider enterprise environmental factors, which are those external conditions like, say, overall risk thresholds set by the school administration or the board, maybe industry standards for event safety, or even just the prevailing organizational culture regarding risk-taking. Is it generally encouraged or discouraged?
Right, the context you're working in.
Exactly. And finally, organizational process assets, or OPAs. These are like your school's institutional memory and best practices.
Okay, like templates, lessons learned.
Exactly. Things like the organization's official risk policy, past lessons learned documents from similar events. Remember last year's food poisoning incident? Let's not repeat that. And standard templates for risk registers, and maybe even pre-existing risk categories, possibly organized into something called a risk breakdown structure, RBS.
An RBS, what's that?
An RBS is basically a hierarchical way to visualize and categorize potential risks. Think of it like the branches of a tree.
Okay.
It helps ensure you have a comprehensive view and don't miss major areas. So at level 0, you might just have all project risks. Then level 1 could break down into major categories like, say, technical risks.
Yeah.
Sounds the sound system failing. Computer problems for online ticketing. Management risks. Management risks see you poor coordination between teacher committees, volunteer no-shows, and external risks. See sudden power cuts, heavy rains during an outdoor part of the event, maybe even a local band or strike.
Ah, okay. It helps organize your thinking.
Exactly. This systematic categorization helps ensure you consider all possible sources of risk in a structured, organized manner.
So you gather all this foundational information from all these different sources, and then how do you actually, synthesize it and make decisions about your risk approach? What kind of tools do you use for that part?
Great question. Once you have the inputs, you need tools to process them. A primary tool, which is invaluable in pretty much every management process, is expert judgment.
Right, talking to people who know.
Exactly. Leveraging the knowledge and experience of individuals who've successfully managed similar projects before, or who have specialized knowledge in risk management itself. It's like asking your older sibling who just finished college about their final year project experience. They can tell you what typically goes wrong and maybe how to avoid it.
Good advice is gold.
Absolutely. We also use various data analysis techniques, specifically stakeholder analysis. This involves a deep dive into the needs, expectations, and, importantly, the risk appetites of those key individuals we identified in the register, making sure our overall approach aligns with what matters most to them.
Okay.
And of course, structured meetings are essential. You need to get all the relevant stakeholders and team members together, maybe the annual day committee, key teachers, student representatives, to discuss and formally agree upon the risk management approach. Having a skilled facilitator is really crucial here to keep everyone focused, encourage open discussion, and help resolve any disagreements about how cautious or adventurous you should be.
So lots of talking and agreeing.
Essential talking, agreeing, yes. And the main output of this entire process, the thing you create, is the risk management plan.
The rule book.
The rule book, exactly. This is your project's definitive guide for how all risks will be identified, analyzed, responded to, and monitored. It serves as a comprehensive guide for all the subsequent risk activities we'll talk about.
Okay, so what's in this rule book? What does it detail?
It details several really important elements. First, the risk strategy, your general high-level approach. For example, for this annual day event, we'll adopt a very conservative financial strategy to minimize any potential cost overruns. Then, the methodology, the specific tools, techniques, and data sources you'll actually use. Like, we'll conduct weekly brainstorming sessions for risk identification, and we'll use a simple probability and impact matrix for prioritization. Roles and responsibilities. This clearly defines who does what in the risk management process. It avoids confusion later. For a community fair, maybe one person is designated to handle all food-related risks, another focuses purely on safety and security.
So everyone knows their job.
Everyone knows their job. Crucially, funding and timing. How much money, maybe from the school budget, and how much time are you specifically allocating for risk management activities throughout the project? This ensures resources are actually available when you need them for, say, mitigation actions. Risk categories. How you'll group risks, often using that comprehensive risk breakdown structure we discussed, to make sure no major area is overlooked. Stakeholder risk appetite. A clear record of how much risk key individuals, like the principal and the organization, the school, are comfortable with. This then translates directly into specific risk thresholds for each project objective, like schedule or budget.
The measurable limits.
The measurable limits, yes. Then, very importantly, definitions of probability and impacts. This is absolutely crucial for consistency. What does high probability or significant impact actually mean for this specific project? For example, for a school test, maybe high probability is defined as 70% chance of that question type appearing. Significant impact might mean it affects your overall marks by more than, say, 10%, not just getting one question wrong. Having this common understanding prevents massive misinterpretation later.
Yeah, everyone needs to speak the same language.
Exactly. Connected to that is the probability and impact matrix, P&I matrix. This is usually a simple but really powerful grid that visually maps how likely something is versus how big a deal it would be if it happened. We'll use this a lot in the next steps. But if a risk lands in the high probability and high impact box, like your main actor getting seriously sick the day before the play, it immediately signals itself as a top priority for action. Reporting formats. How will you communicate about risks? What will your risk register updates look like? What goes in the summary risk report for the principal? How often would you share these? And finally, tracking. How will you keep an eye on risks over time, track their status, and maybe even audit the effectiveness of your whole risk management process periodically? Wow, okay, that's a comprehensive rulebook. So this first step is basically about setting up the entire framework, making sure everyone involved is totally on the same page about how we're going to approach the unknown for this specific project. Precisely.
It's truly laying the strategic groundwork for everything that follows, ensuring that your approach is tailored, appropriate, and effective right from the outset. It's like designing the perfect defensive formation before the big cricket match even begins.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so we've got our comprehensive rulebook, the risk management plan. Now, the very next step seems logical. We need to actually go out and find those surprises.
Time to put on our detective hats.
Exactly. This is identify risks, finding the surprises. This is where you actively look for all the individual risks, remember, both positive opportunities and negative threats, and also think about the broader sources of overall project risk. And importantly, you write them all down.
Document everything.
Document everything. It's crucial because, quite simply, you can't manage what you don't know of, right?
True. Ignorance is definitely not bliss here.
Not at all. This step aims to be exhaustive, trying to ensure no stone is left unturned, and, importantly, no potential opportunity is missed either.
Absolutely. And as you said, we become vigilant detectives here. We're not just passively looking for problems. We should be actively hunting for those hidden gems, those potential opportunities that could make our project truly shine, maybe even exceed everyone's expectations.
Yeah, find the upside.
Find the upside.
Yeah.
And it's really crucial that everyone involved feels empowered to speak up. From the core project team, the teachers leading the annual day, right down to the 8th graders who might be helping with decorations.
Everyone has a viewpoint.
Everyone has a viewpoint and might spot something others miss. They should feel empowered to identify and vocalize potential risks or opportunities they see, fostering a shared sense of ownership. I noticed the paint we ordered looks like it might run out. That's valuable information.
Yeah, absolutely. And this isn't just a one-time thing either, right?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
This process is performed continuously throughout the project's lifecycle. Why? Because new risks can always emerge as things change, and existing ones can evolve or even disappear. So it's never just a single activity you do at the start and then you're done. It's iterative.
Okay, so what helps us find these risks? What are the inputs for this detective work?
For inputs, this process leverages almost every other plan and document you have for the project. It's quite hungry for information. Key ones include your overall project management plan components. Things like the scope management plan, the schedule management plan, cost, quality, resource plans. They all contain clues, and especially the risk management plan we just created, because that provides the categories, definitions, and responsibilities for how we identify risks.
Right, the rulebook guides the search.
Precisely. Also, really important project documents like your assumption log. Every project is built on assumptions, right?
Yeah, things you just take for granted.
Things you assume will be true, like it won't rain during our outdoor event, or the volunteers will definitely show up. What if those assumptions turn out to be wrong? Each invalidated assumption is a potential risk that needs to be identified.
Ah, okay. So challenge your assumptions.
Absolutely. The lessons learned register from past projects is gold here. It helps you remember what went wrong, or maybe what went wonderfully right before, so you don't repeat costly mistakes or miss proven opportunities. For example, if a previous school event had a persistent sound system issue causing feedback.
Oh, that screeching sound.
Yeah, awful. You'd know to rigorously check for that possibility this time around. Even formal agreements with vendors or suppliers and the related procurement documentation can reveal risks. Maybe a vendor has a history of late deliveries documented, or specific clauses in the contract shift risk onto you.
Okay, so look everywhere for clues.
Look everywhere. Gather all that background information.
So once you have all that background info, how do you actually go about finding these risks? What are the practical tools and techniques you use to uncover them? It can't just be random guessing.
No, definitely not random guessing. There are several effective tools and techniques, and each offers a kind of different lens to view potential surprises. Brainstorming is probably the most common and often very powerful.
Yeah, get everyone in a room.
Exactly. Get everyone in a room, maybe even cross-functional teams, people with different perspectives, and just, shout out ideas. The goal initially is quantity over quality. Just get everything out there. What could possibly go wrong?
And the good stuff, too.
And importantly, what could go amazingly well?
Yeah.
Don't forget the opportunities. For example, if you're planning a big family wedding in India, imagine the brainstorming. What could go wrong with the catering? Food not enough, maybe it tastes bad, late delivery. What if the generator at the venue fails during the main ceremony? Power cut.
Oh, yeah, crucial.
What if a key relative traveling from abroad can't make it due to flight cancellations? These are all potential risks you'd brainstorm.
Okay, brainstorming sounds key. What else?
Checklists are also incredibly useful, especially checklists based on historical information from similar projects or maybe industry best practices. Think of it like a comprehensive pre-flight checklist for a pilot.
Right. Ensures you don't miss the obvious stuff.
Exactly. It ensures you don't miss obvious, recurring things that often trip people up. However, it's really vital to remember that a checklist can never be exhaustive for a truly unique project.
Because every project is different.
Because every project is different. So you still need to think beyond the checklist. Don't let it limit your thinking. Then there are interviews. Talking to experienced project participants, key stakeholders, or subject matter experts can uncover hidden risks and provide invaluable insights gained from their past experiences. You could literally ask your Uncle Gagey, who's planned like 10 family weddings.
A wedding expert.
The wedding expert. Uncle Gagey, what typically causes problems that people don't see coming? Their experience is priceless.
I bet. What about digging deeper into problems?
Ah, yes. For that, we use root cause analysis, especially for threats. This involves asking why. Repeatedly, maybe 5 times, maybe more, to dig deeper and find the true underlying source of a potential problem, rather than just treating the symptoms.
Okay, give me an example.
Sure. Let's say a risk is the project might be delayed. Okay, why? Because the main supplier's slow. Okay, why are they slow? Because they have severe staff shortages. Okay, why do they have staff shortages? Because maybe they don't pay competitive wages or offer good benefits compared to others. See? You get to the root cause, which might be addressable differently than just yelling at the supplier.
Yeah. Addresses the real problem.
Exactly. And you can do a similar thing for opportunities, asking how could this amazing thing happen, to understand the underlying factors you might be able to enhance or replicate.
Clever. What else is in the toolkit?
We also use SWOT analysis.
Yeah.
You've probably heard of this one. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Yeah, done that in business class.
Right. It helps broaden the search by looking systematically at both internal factors, strengths and weaknesses of your project or team, and external factors, opportunities and threats in the environment. For example, imagine someone launching a new street food stall, maybe selling amazing chat in Delhi. A strength could be a unique, secret family recipe for the chutney. A weakness might be having no fixed spot yet, or very little starting capital. An opportunity could be an upcoming local festival that will draw huge crowds, or maybe a new government scheme supporting small food businesses. And a threat could be heavy, unseasonal rain driving customers away, or maybe new, stricter health regulations being enforced.
Okay, that gives a balanced view.
It does. It helps identify risks arising from both inside and outside the project. And finally, we often use prompt lists. These are predetermined lists of risk categories or potential sources that act as mental triggers to ensure comprehensive coverage. A very common one in business and projects is PESTLE.
PESTLE, what's that stand for?
It stands for political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental.
Okay. Broad categories.
Very broad categories. This framework ensures you think broadly across various external dimensions that could impact your project. For example, if you're involved in building a new housing society complex, maybe in Gurgaon,
Right.
you'd consider. Political, any new government rules coming on construction standards or land acquisition. Economic refiance, interest rates for home loans change, affecting buyer demand. Social, are people's preferences for community amenities or apartment sizes shifting. Technological, are there new sustainable building materials or construction techniques that could offer benefits or maybe pose risks if untested? Legal, are any new permits needed, or changes happening in property laws or environmental regulations? Environmental concerns about unseasonal rain delaying construction, air pollution rules, maybe even seismic activity in the region.
Wow, okay. PESTLE makes you think really widely.
It does. These frameworks are great for ensuring no major category of potential risk is accidentally overlooked during identification.
Wow, that's a lot of systematic ways to dig up potential issues and also those positive possibilities. It really is comprehensive detective work. So after all this meticulous investigation and analysis using these tools, what do you actually produce? What's the main output of this identification step?
The main output, and arguably the most crucial living document in the entire risk management process, is the risk register.
The master list.
The master list, exactly. This becomes your central repository for all risk-related information identified so far. Each distinct risk gets a unique ID number for tracking. It includes a clear and concise description of the risk. For e.g., unexpected heavy rainfall during planned outdoor setup phase might delay schedule by 3 days. It should also list potential owners who might be accountable for managing this risk later. And maybe some initial ideas for potential responses can be captured here too.
Okay, so it's a detailed log.
A detailed log that will grow and evolve. For example, risk ID 001, description. Costume vendor ABC, based maybe in Lajpat Nagar, might deliver costumes for the annual day play 2 days late, potentially impacting crucial rehearsal schedules and the overall performance quality. It's specific. This document is continuously updated throughout the project as new risks are found or existing ones change. We also typically produce a risk report at this stage or update an existing one. This provides a summary of the overall project risk situation and highlights the key individual risks identified so far. It's more of a snapshot for stakeholders and senior management, showing where the project stands in terms of its total risk exposure at that point in time.
That's a great comprehensive approach to make sure nothing significant is missed. It really emphasizes thoroughness in that identification phase.
Okay, so you've done all that diligent detective work, used all those cool tools, and now you have this potentially huge, comprehensive list of all the potential surprises, threats, and opportunities captured in your risk register.
Yep, could be quite a long list.
Exactly. But let's be real, you probably can't deal with every single risk on that list with the same level of intensity or resources. Some are just, a small bump in the road, maybe an inconvenience.
Minor stuff. While others could potentially completely derail your entire project or conversely unlock massive unforeseen success if you grab the opportunity.
Absolutely. Some are game changers, positive or negative.
Right. This is where, for me, it gets really strategic and, fascinating. The next step, perform qualitative risk analysis, is all about making sense of that potentially long list. It's about deciding which risks are most important by figuring out for each one how likely it is to actually happen, its probability, and how big its impact would be on your project objectives if it did happen.
Likelihood and impact, the core concept.
Exactly. It's just like deciding which topics you need to study hardest for your exams back in school. Do you spend more precious time on the chapter you're really bad at but know is super important for your final score, or the one you're already pretty good at but barely matters for the overall grade?
Great analogy. It's all about focus.
It is, and the true power of this analysis, I think, isn't just about mechanically sorting risks into high, medium, low piles. It's about building a shared understanding and maybe even consensus among the team and key stakeholders, ensuring everyone's energy, focus, and resources are channeled into the same critical areas, preventing that drain of effort on minor issues that won't really move the needle.
That's perfectly put. This process helps us focus our limited energy, our limited time, and our limited financial resources on the risks that truly matter most and genuinely deserve our attention. It assesses the priority of those identified individual project risks we just found. And it also provides a solid basis for maybe doing more detailed quantitative analysis later if that's needed for certain high-priority risks.
Okay. And is this another one-time thing, or?
No, like identification, this analysis process is also performed throughout the project's lifecycle. It often gets revisited, maybe before the start of each new iteration or phase in agile or hybrid environments, because new information comes to light all the time, changing probabilities or impacts.
Right, things evolve. So what do you need to do this qualitative analysis? What are the key inputs?
The main inputs for this step are primarily your updated risk register, which contains that comprehensive list of all the identified risks we just generated. And, crucially, your risk management plan, the rule book we created in the first step.
Why is the rule book so important here?
Because it provides those vital pre-agreed definitions for probability and impact scales. What does high, medium, low actually mean for this project? And it contains the agreed-upon probability and impact matrix structure that you'll use to categorize the risks based on those assessments. Without those agreed definitions, the analysis becomes purely subjective and inconsistent.
Got it. Consistency is key. So how do you actually go about prioritizing these risks? Is it just like a group discussion and everyone shares their gut feeling, or is there a more structured way to assess them?
It's definitely more structured than just gut feeling, although expert judgment certainly plays a vital role. We heavily employ expert judgment and interviews again here. We gather informed opinions from people who are knowledgeable about the specific types of risks involved. Maybe they're technical specialists on the team, experienced project managers who've seen similar things, or external domain experts.
Okay, action tapping into experience.
Tapping into experience. But, crucially, before we even start assigning probabilities and impacts, we often perform a risk data quality assessment.
Checking your facts first.
Exactly. We need to make sure the information we have about each risk is actually accurate, reliable, and relevant enough to make informed decisions based upon it. We're asking questions like, is this information factual, or is it just a rumor someone heard in the hallway? Is it timely and up-to-date, or is it based on outdated reports? Is it complete, or are there significant gaps in our understanding?
Why is that check so critical?
Because making a high-priority decision based on faulty or incomplete data can be worse than not planning at all. It can lead to misallocated resources, focusing on the wrong things, or implementing ineffective responses. If the data quality for a particular risk is found to be poor, our very first step might actually be to go back and gather better, more reliable information before attempting to prioritize it.
Okay, data quality first. Then what?
Then comes the core activity, the risk probability and impact assessment. This is where we assign likelihood level, e.g. maybe using terms like very high, high, medium, low, very low, or perhaps percentages, and an impact level for each identified risk. We use the specific scales and definitions we explicitly agreed upon back in the risk management plan.
Right, using the agreed language.
Precisely. We assess the potential effect on key project objectives like schedule, cost, quality, scope, or performance. And importantly, we need to remember that impacts are negative for threats. For example, a delay adds 10% to the overall project schedule, and positive for opportunities. The example in innovation reduces the final cost by 5%.
Okay, so you assess probability and impact for each risk. Is that it?
That's the core. But what's also critically important, according to our sources, is the assessment of other risk parameters. Beyond just probability and impact, we should consider other factors that can help refine the prioritization and inform our response planning later on.
Like what other factors?
Well, things like urgency. How quickly do we really need to act on this risk if it starts to materialize? If your main actor for the annual day play falls sick the day before the performance, that's incredibly high urgency. You need a response plan ready now. Proximity. How soon might this risk actually impact us if it occurs? A potential supplier strike scheduled for next month is much more proximal and concerning than one vaguely projected for maybe next year sometime. Dormancy. How long might it take until we discover the impact after the risk event has actually happened? Think about a hidden structural crack in a newly constructed building that only manifests itself years later through visible damage that risk had high dormancy.
The hidden problems.
Exactly, also. Manageability, controllability. How easy is it for us, the project team, to actually deal with this risk or control its outcome once it occurs? Can we realistically influence the factors involved? Some risks are easier to manage than others. Detectability. How easily can we spot this risk coming or monitor its progression? A sudden, significant increase in raw material prices is usually easily detectable from market reports or supplier communications. Other risks might be much harder to see coming. Strategic impact. How much does this risk affect the big overall strategic goals of the project or maybe even the entire organization? Does it threaten the project's very existence or its core value proposition? And an interesting one, propinquity. This is about how much people perceive the risk to matter. Sometimes a risk that is quantitatively small in terms of probability and impact can still feel disproportionately huge to the people involved, maybe due to personal concerns, high visibility, or ethical considerations. This perception itself needs to be managed.
Wow, okay. So it's not just P&I. There are many dimensions to consider.
Many dimensions that add richness to the analysis and help prioritize more effectively. We also often use risk categorization during this phase. We might group similar risks together using our RBS categories, for example, looking at all the technical risks together or all the external vendor risks together. This can help identify patterns or common causes and potentially lead to developing common response strategies for entire groups of risks.
Makes sense. Handle similar things similarly.
Exactly. And a key data representation tool we use to bring this all together is the probability and impact matrix itself. This grid, which we defined back in the planning phase, allows us to visually and quickly assign a priority level or score to each risk based on its assessed probability and impact.
Right, the grid with colors often. Red, yellow, green.
Often, yes. Those colors instantly communicate priority. For instance, if the risk of heavy unseasonal rain during an outdoor annual day event is assessed as having both high probability, maybe based on weather forecasts, and a high impact on crucial objectives like audience turnout and overall mood of the event, then it lands squarely in the red zone, categorized as a critical threat requiring immediate attention and robust response planning.
Okay. And you mentioned other charts.
For more complex projects, or if you have a very large number of risks to manage, we might use more advanced visual tools. Things like hierarchical charts or bubble charts can be used to represent multiple risk parameters simultaneously on a graph, maybe showing probability on one axis, impact on another, and the size or color of the bubble representing urgency or manageability. It helps visualize complex relationships.
Very cool. So after all this analysis, P&I, other factors, categorization using the matrix, what's the final output? What changes?
The output of this entire qualitative analysis process critically updates your key risk documents, primarily the risk register and the risk report.
What gets added to the risk register?
Each individual risk in the register now has its assigned probability level, its assigned impact level, and based on the matrix, a clear priority level or score. You have high priority threat, medium priority opportunity, low priority watch list. This is also the definitive point where a confirmed risk owner is assigned to each significant risk.
Someone responsible.
Yes, someone who will take responsibility for planning its response and monitoring it going forward. This ownership is critical for accountability. And importantly, based on this prioritization, some very low priority risks might even be consciously demoted to a watch list.
What's a watch list?
It means we're aware of them, we've documented them, and we'll maybe check back on them periodically, but we aren't going to spend active effort or resources planning a specific response for them yet. This deliberately frees up the team's time and budget to focus intensely on the higher priority items that really matter.
Smart. Focus your firepower.
Exactly. So this qualitative step is really about making intelligent, data-informed decisions on where to focus your effort and resources, rather than getting completely overwhelmed by every single possibility you identified. It helps you zoom in on what truly matters for project success and ensures your team's precious energy is directed efficiently. It's just like a doctor in an emergency room triaging patients. You have to address the most critical cases first to save lives. Now, this next step is like shifting gears. It's like being a highly skilled data scientist specifically for your project. Well, the qualitative analysis we just discussed helps us prioritize risks based on their relative importance using scales like high, medium, low.
Yeah, getting a sense of the big ones.
Exactly. Perform quantitative risk analysis is about moving beyond that subjective or relative assessment to put actual numbers on the uncertainty. It numerically analyzes the combined effect of all those identified and prioritized individual risks on your overall project objectives.
Combined effect. How?
It uses models and simulations to figure out how all these different uncertainties might interact and accumulate to affect, say, your total project cost or your final completion date. It's moving from saying, I think this is a big risk, to something much more concrete, like there's a 30% probability that we'll exceed our project budget by more than 10 lakh rupees if we don't actively address this specific set of high priority issues.
Wow, that's precise.
It is. It transforms those educated guesses or relative rankings into data-driven probabilities and financial impacts. This helps us make decisions with a lot more confidence, especially financial decisions, and allows us to allocate contingency funds or schedule buffers much more accurately and defensively.
Okay, but you wouldn't do this for every project, would you? Sounds complicated.
That's a very important point. This process is definitely not required or even appropriate for every single project. It's typically reserved for large, complex, or strategically critical projects. Or sometimes it might be a specific contractual requirement, especially for major government contracts, huge infrastructure developments like building a new airport, or maybe complex defense projects where the financial stakes and uncertainty are very high. For simpler projects, qualitative analysis is often perfectly sufficient. But when you need objective numerical data to assess the overall project risk exposure and make major investment decisions, this is the process you turn to.
Okay, so for the big complex stuff where precision really matters, what kinds of inputs do you need to feed into this numerical analysis to get such concrete results? It must yield good data.
Absolutely. Garbage in, garbage out definitely applies here. For inputs, you primarily need your updated risk register, which contains the list of individual risks that you've already prioritized through qualitative analysis. You typically only quantify the high or medium priority ones. You also absolutely need your project's scope, schedule, and cost baselines.
The original plan.
Yes, the original approved plan for what the project will deliver, when it's supposed to be done, and how much it's budgeted to cost. These baselines provide the initial targets against which the potential variability caused by risks will be measured. You also need various other detailed project documents, like the detailed cost estimates for work packages, the duration estimates for individual schedule activities, often expressed as ranges, like best case, most likely worst case, and maybe current forecasts of future performance to understand the starting point from which variability will be evaluated.
And you mentioned special software.
Yes, this process often requires specialized risk modeling software, like Monte Carlo simulation packages, and definitely requires expertise in statistical analysis, probability distributions, and modeling techniques. It's not something you typically do on the back of an envelope.
Right, needs specialists. So how do you actually put numbers on something as inherently uncertain as a future risk event or an unknown duration? What are these advanced tools that help with that kind of deep analysis?
This is where some really powerful analytical tools come into play, providing numerical insights that go far beyond simple categorization. One of the most common and powerful is simulations, particularly using Monte Carlo analysis.
Monte Carlo, like the casino.
Named after it because of the element of chance involved. This technique involves running your project's schedule or cost model thousands of times on a computer. In each run or iteration, the software randomly picks different outcomes for each risk, will it occur or not, and for each uncertain activity duration or cost, based on their predefined probability distributions. For example, an activity might be defined as taking between 3 and 7 days with a certain probability curve, or a specific risk might have a 20% chance of occurring, and if it does, it adds 5 days to the schedule and 50,000 rupees to the cost.
Okay, so it runs thousands of what-if scenarios.
Exactly. Thousands of possible futures for your project based on the uncertainties you've defined. The output is typically presented as a probability distribution, often shown as an S-curve graph. This graph shows the cumulative probability of achieving certain cost or scheduled targets.
What does that tell you?
It might tell you something like, there's a 70% probability that our new metro line construction project in Mumbai will be finished by December 2028 or earlier, or there's an 85% probability that our software development project will cost less than 2.45 crore rupees. It doesn't just give you a single deterministic estimate. It gives you a realistic probability range for your project's final outcomes. This allows you to communicate confidence levels to stakeholders, like telling a CEO, we have a good chance, say 80%, of meeting this deadline, but there's still a 10% chance of a significant delay if the worst-case combination of risks occurs. It transforms a simple best guess into a data-driven probability distribution of potential results.
That's incredibly useful for decision-making. What other tools do you use?
Another very powerful tool, often used alongside Monte Carlo, is sensitivity analysis. This is frequently displayed visually as a tornado diagram.
Tornado. Why tornado?
Because the resulting bar chart looks like a tornado. This visual tool helps identify which specific individual risks have the biggest potential influence or swing on a particular project objective, like the total project cost or the overall project duration. The risks with the largest potential impact, positive or negative, are shown as the longest bars at the top, tapering down to risks with smaller impacts at the bottom, hence the tornado shape.
Okay, so it shows you the biggest drivers.
Exactly. It highlights the risks that are truly driving the overall project variability. For a complex software development project, for instance, a tornado diagram might clearly show that the risk of unclear or changing customer requirements has by far the biggest potential impact on the project's duration, much more so than risks like key developer sickness or temporary power outages. This helps you laser focus your risk response efforts and scarce resources on the risks that will give you the most bang for your buck in reducing overall uncertainty.
Makes sense. Focus on the big levers. Any others?
Yes, we also sometimes use decision tree analysis. This is particularly helpful when you're facing several alternative strategic choices or paths forward, especially when uncertainty is involved and each choice leads to different possible outcomes with varying probabilities and payoffs.
Like choosing between options.
Exactly. Imagine you're a textile manufacturer in India deciding whether to invest 50 lakh rupees to upgrade an old existing factory or maybe spend 1 crore rupees to build a brand new state-of-the-art one. A decision tree helps you map out these choices, the chance events that could follow, like strong market demand versus weak market demand for your textiles, assign probabilities to those events, and calculate the expected monetary value, EMV, for each potential path or decision branch. Expected monetary value. It's basically the weighted average of all possible outcomes for a decision path, considering their financial value and their probability. It helps you choose the path with the highest potential overall value, even with all the uncertainties factored in. It structures the decision-making process under uncertainty. Lastly, related tools like influence diagrams can also be used. These are graphical aids that show the relationships and dependencies between different decisions, uncertain events, and final outcomes, helping to visualize complex decision problems under uncertainty.
Wow. Okay. That's really diving deep into the details and getting concrete, measurable numbers on uncertainty. It feels like a completely different level of precision compared to the qualitative approach.
It really is. It complements the qualitative analysis by adding that numerical rigor where needed.
So what do you ultimately get out of all this sophisticated number crunching? What are the key outputs, and how do they really inform your decisions going forward?
The outputs from quantitative analysis primarily feed into and significantly update your risk report, providing much more detailed insights. Key outputs include a quantified assessment of overall project risk exposure. This tells you, for example, the precise statistical probability of meeting your required project end date or staying within your approved cost target. This is invaluable for communicating realistic expectations to stakeholders and making informed gonna-go or strategic decisions. A determination of the optimal contingency reserve needed, based on the simulation results and the organization's desired confidence level. For example, we want 80% confidence in meeting the cost target. This analysis calculates precisely how much extra time or money you should rationally set aside in your budget or schedule as a contingency buffer to absorb the potential impact of the quantified risks. This replaces arbitrary percentage buffers with data-driven reserves.
So no more random 10% contingency.
Ideally, yes. It should be based on the actual risk exposure. It also clearly identifies the major drivers of overall project risk. Those specific risks highlighted by sensitivity analysis, like the top bars in the tornado diagram, that are truly swinging the needle and contributing most to the overall uncertainty. This tells you exactly where to focus your most robust response efforts for maximum impact. And importantly, based on all these numbers, it often provides specific recommended risk responses or strategies, suggesting actions that will most effectively reduce the negative risk exposure or enhance the potential positive outcomes, thus optimizing the project's chances of success. This whole process empowers the project team and decision makers to move from educated guesses or subjective feelings to highly confident, data-driven strategies for navigating the project's future.
Okay, this next step feels really crucial. This is where, as you said, theory meets reality, where all that meticulous analysis we've done identifying, assessing qualitatively, maybe even quantifying, actually transforms into concrete action.
Exactly. The planning isn't the end goal. Action is.
Right. We're not just thinking anymore about what if this happens. We're deciding, okay, what will we actually do if that what if scenario occurs? It's about building a robust, proactive action plan. It's just like a cricket team. They don't just analyze the opposition bowlers. They also set up a strong defensive field placement strategy and have clear plans for which batsmen will attack and try to hit boundaries when the opportunity arises.
Perfect analogy again. Defense and attack, threats and opportunities.
Exactly. So this step, plan risk responses, is all about developing different options, selecting the most appropriate strategies, and then agreeing on specific, concrete actions to deal with both those individual risks we've prioritized and also addressing the overall level of project risk. It's simply not enough to just know about the risks. You absolutely need a plan for them. This step translates all that invaluable knowledge or analysis into actionable steps that can actually be implemented by the team.
That's absolutely right. Once those risks have been identified, thoroughly analyzed, qualitatively and maybe quantitatively, and prioritized, the nominated risk owner for each significant risk needs to step up and develop a detailed response plan.
The owner takes charge.
The owner takes charge. This process is all about finding appropriate, effective, and efficient ways to address the overall project risk exposure, strategically minimize the impact or likelihood of individual threats, and proactively maximize the chances or benefits of individual opportunities. The project manager also needs to consider how to respond to the project's overall risk level. Is it acceptable, or does the whole approach need adjusting?
And what makes a response good?
For a response strategy to be considered truly effective, it generally needs to meet several criteria. It needs to be appropriate for the significance of the risk. You don't spend 1 million rupees to avoid a 10,000 rupee problem. It needs to be cost-effective, meaning the cost of implementing the response doesn't outweigh the potential benefit or the avoided damage. It has to be realistic within the project context. Can we actually do this? It needs to be agreed upon by all the relevant stakeholders. No point planning something the sponsor won't approve. And crucially, it must be clearly owned by a responsible person or team who will ensure it gets done.
Okay, clear criteria. What information do you need to plan these responses? Inputs.
We use various inputs here, primarily your updated risk register, which is your prioritized list of risks with all their qualitative and maybe quantitative assessments. The risk report is also key, as it shows the overall project risk status and highlights the major drivers. Your cost baseline is an important input too, because you need to understand the available contingency funds and budget realistically. For implementing these risk responses, they often cost money or take time.
Makes sense. And tools. Still using experts.
Oh yes, expert judgment is of course a key tool here again. You need to leverage specialists who really understand different response strategies, perhaps based on experience from similar projects or specific technical domains. How do you best mitigate this technical risk? What's the most effective way to transfer this financial risk? Experts can guide those choices.
Okay, so let's get into the strategies themselves. What are the actual options? Let's start with how you deal with the negative risks, the threats that could potentially harm your project. What can you do about them?
For threats, the standard framework gives us 5 main strategies to choose from. First is escalate. This is appropriate when a threat is actually outside the scope of the project or beyond the project team's authority or control. Maybe it impacts the entire organization or multiple projects within a larger program.
Like a big policy change.
Exactly. Or, for instance, if a major technical issue with the National Railway's signaling system impacts your local station upgrade project, that issue is too big for your project team to solve. The National Railway Board needs to handle it. So, you formally escalate it up the chain. Once a risk is escalated, your project team typically doesn't monitor or manage it further at their level. It's now owned at a higher level.
Okay, pass it up the ladder. What else?
2. Second is avoid. This is often the most direct approach if it's feasible. You essentially eliminate the threat completely by changing the project plan, scope, or approach so the risk can no longer occur.
Get rid of it entirely.
Get rid of it entirely. For instance, to avoid the high risk of monsoon rains disrupting an outdoor annual day event in Mumbai, you might decide to change the plan and shift the entire venue indoors. Or maybe you change the project scope entirely to remove the high-risk component. This is often the most desirable strategy for high-impact threats, if you can find a way to do it.
Okay. Avoid if possible. Next.
3. Third is transfer. Here, you shift the ownership and the impact of the threat to a third party. This doesn't eliminate the risk, but it makes someone else responsible for bearing the consequences, usually in exchange for paying a risk premium or a fee.
Like insurance.
Insurance is the classic example. To protect your electronics store from the financial impact of theft, you get insurance. You're not eliminating the risk of theft happening, but if it does, someone else, the insurance company, is now financially responsible for covering the loss. This strategy is also very common in construction projects, using things like performance bonds or warranties from contractors.
Okay, make it someone else's problem, basically.
Essentially, yes, for a price. 4. Fourth is mitigate. This is probably the most common strategy. It's about taking proactive steps to reduce either the probability of the threat occurring or its impact if it does occur, or sometimes both, down to an acceptable level. You can't avoid it entirely, but you can make it less likely or less damaging.
So lessen the blow.
Lessen the blow, exactly. For example, to mitigate the risk of significant traffic delays for a crucial delivery in a bustling Indian city like Bengaluru, you might plan to use multiple alternative delivery routes, install GPS trackers on the vehicles to monitor progress in real time, or maybe schedule the deliveries during off-peak hours early in the morning. The key here is that early mitigation actions are usually far more effective and much less costly than trying to react after the problem has already fully materialized.
Be proactive. Go ahead. Hey, one more for threats.
Yes, the 5th strategy is accept. Here, you acknowledge the existence of the risk, but consciously choose to take no proactive action to change its probability or impact. This strategy is usually considered appropriate only for low-priority threats, where the potential cost or effort of implementing any other response strategy actually outweighs the potential damage the risk could cause.
So just live with it.
Well, there are 2 ways to accept. There's active acceptance. This means you acknowledge the risk, take no immediate action, but you do establish a contingency plan or set aside specific contingency reserves, time or money, just in case the risk does occur, like keeping emergency cash specifically for unexpected car repairs during a long family road trip. It might happen, so you're prepared. Then there's passive acceptance. This is where you acknowledge the risk but decide to do absolutely nothing. No contingency plan, no reserves. You just hope for the best and plan to deal with it if it happens. This is essentially the cross your fingers approach, and it's generally not recommended for anything other than very minor risks.
Okay, so 5 ways to handle threats. Escalate, avoid, transfer, mitigate, or axful. Accept actively or passively, that's a clear set of options. Now, what are the good stuff? How do you plan to make the most of those positive risks, the opportunities, and really leverage them?
Great question. We need strategies for the upside too. For opportunities, we have a similar but kind of inverse set of 5 strategies. 1, escalate. Just like with threats, if an opportunity arises that's really beyond the scope or authority of your project to exploit fully, you escalate it. For example, maybe your project discovers a potential new market application for your company's technology, or identifies a new government policy, like a tax break for investing in green manufacturing, that could benefit the entire company, not just your specific project. You escalate it to a higher organizational level, like senior management or a strategy department, so they can take advantage of it more broadly.
Okay, share the good news upwards.
Exactly. 2, exploit. This is the most aggressive strategy for opportunities. You take decisive action to make sure the opportunity definitely happens, increasing its probability to 100% if possible, and ensuring you capture the full benefits. For instance, if your project team discovers a new indigenous technology that can drastically cut production costs for your manufacturing plant, You might choose to invest heavily and immediately in R&D and implementation to fully exploit that potential benefit and gain a significant market advantage.
Go all in to make it happen.
Go all in. 3, share. This involves partnering with a third party to show the ownership, costs, and ultimately the benefits of an opportunity. This often happens when you can achieve more together than you could alone. For example, if you've developed a fantastic new online learning course but lack marketing reach.
Right. Need more students?
You might partner with a bigger, established e-commerce platform or a well-known educational institution. You share the advertising costs, leverage their much wider reach to enroll many more students, and then you share the resulting revenue. This allows you to capture much bigger benefits than you likely could have achieved on your own.
Team up for bigger rewards. Okay.
Enhance. This is the counterpart to mitigation for threats. Here, you take actions to increase either the probability of the positive risk occurring or its potential positive impact if it does occur, or both. You try to make the good thing more likely or even better. For example, if there's a chance your project might finish early due to a new, more efficient process you've trialed.
Nice. Everyone loves finishing early.
Absolutely. You might choose to enhance this opportunity by allocating some extra resources to fully implement that process, or by further streamlining workflows to make that early completion happen for sure, or perhaps to increase the scope of benefits you can deliver within that saved time.
Okay. Boost the good stuff. And the last one.
5, accept. Similar to threats, you can also choose to simply accept an opportunity. You acknowledge its existence, but don't take any proactive action to actively pursue it or enhance it. Again, there's active acceptance. You acknowledge the opportunity and maybe have a small contingency reserve or plan ready to quickly jump on it if it spontaneously appears, showing preparedness. Passive acceptance. You just observe, take no action, and hope the opportunity materializes on its own without any effort from your side. Again, generally only suitable for minor or uncertain opportunities.
Okay, 5 strategies for opportunities too. Escalate, exploit, share, enhance, or accept. That gives a really balanced toolkit for dealing with both sides of uncertainty.
It does. And we also often use contingent response strategies, sometimes called fallback plans or Plan B. These are predefined specific actions that only get triggered and implemented if a specific predetermined trigger event occurs.
Like an if-then plan.
Exactly like an if-then plan. For example, if our primary costume supplier notifies us of a delay of more than 3 days, that's the trigger, then we will immediately switch to using our pre-vetted backup supplier B. The trigger condition is clearly defined, and the fallback plan is ready to execute without delay if needed.
Smart to have backups.
Essential for critical risks. And importantly, we need to remember that these same broad strategy categories, avoid, exploit, transfer, share, mitigate, accept, can also be applied to managing the overall project risk level, not just individual risks.
How does that work for the whole project?
Well, if your analysis shows that the overall project risk level is unacceptably high and predominantly negative, for example, quantitative analysis shows a very high probability of massive budget overruns or unacceptable delays, the project leadership might choose a strategy to avoid this by fundamentally changing the project, maybe canceling certain high-risk parts of the project scope, significantly altering the approach, or even recommending cancellation of the entire project if it's deemed just too risky to proceed within the organization's tolerance. Conversely, if there's a huge positive overall risk materializing, maybe a sudden market shift makes the project far more valuable than originally anticipated, they might choose to exploit this at the overall level by adding high-benefit elements to the project scope, increasing its budget, or accelerating it to catch that enhanced strategic impact.
Okay, so you can apply these strategies at the macro level too. That's a really comprehensive approach, covering all the bases for both individual threats and opportunities and the big picture. So what are the crucial outputs of this detailed response planning stage? How does all this careful planning get documented and formally reflected in the project?
The outputs are absolutely crucial because they formalize the action plans and integrate them into the project's execution framework. Key outputs include updates to the project management plan and other related project documents. This often involves generating formal change requests.
Why change requests?
Because your meticulously planned risk responses might necessitate formal changes to the project's agreed-upon baselines. For example, the budget might need more funds allocated to the contingency reserve to cover the costs of mitigation actions. The schedule might need adjustments to incorporate the time required for these risk response activities, or maybe the project scope even needs minor tweaks to avoid or mitigate a major risk. These changes need to go through the formal change control process.
Right, keep everything official. What about the risk register?
The risk register gets significantly updated again in this step. It's really evolving. It now includes, for each prioritized risk, the chosen response strategy, for example, mitigate, avoid, exploit, the specific actions that will be taken to implement that strategy, the trigger conditions for any contingent plans, details of the contingency or fallback plans themselves, and importantly, an assessment of any residual risks.
Residual risks, what are those?
Residual risks are the risks that are expected to remain, even after your planned responses have been implemented. Because you can't always eliminate risks entirely, right? Mitigation might reduce a risk, but not remove it completely. You need to document what's left over.
Okay, the leftovers.
The leftovers. And critically, you also identify and document any secondary risks. These are new risks that are actually created by implementing your chosen response to an original risk.
Oh, solving one problem creates another.
It can happen. For instance, if you decide to switch to a new, untested supplier to avoid a potential delay from your current supplier, that's your response. The secondary risk might be that this new supplier's quality control isn't as good, or perhaps they're even less reliable in the long run. You need to anticipate and plan for these knock-on effects too.
Wow, okay. Need to think ahead about the consequences of your actions.
Always. Finally, your core project schedule and project budget will also likely need to be updated to explicitly include the specific activities, resources, and costs associated with implementing these planned risk responses, making them an integral part of the project's day-to-day work plan, not just a theoretical side document.
So this step is really where you move from just knowing about the what-ifs to creating concrete what we will do's, making those critical plans fully actionable, and integrating them right into the project's operational blueprint.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the essential bridge between analysis and effective execution.
Okay, so you've done all this fantastic detailed planning. You've identified the risks, analyzed them, prioritized the important ones, and come up with these brilliant response strategies and action plans. Everything's documented.
Yep, the plan looks great on paper.
Exactly, but all that amazing work, all those meticulous plans captured in the risk register are completely useless if no one actually does anything about them.
True story. Plans don't implement themselves.
Right. So the sixth step is absolutely critical. Implement risk responses. Making it happen. This is the do it part. It's actually carrying out those agreed upon risk response plans, putting them into motion in the real world. It's like after planning your entire annual day performance down to the very last detail, the script, the sets, the costumes, the rehearsal schedule, this is the phase when you actually start the daily practice, build the physical sets, get the costumes made or delivered, and run those final crucial dress rehearsals. You can plan all you want, but unless someone does the work, nothing actually happens. The rubber really meets the road here.
Absolutely. And it's unfortunately a common pitfall in project management. Teams can spend a huge amount of effort on creating really meticulous, detailed plans, but then the execution, the follow-through, falls short. This can happen for many reasons, maybe a lack of clear ownership, maybe competing priorities, pulling people away, or sometimes just a simple misunderstanding of who was supposed to do what.
Yeah, the plan sits on a shelf.
Exactly. This process, implement risk responses, is designed to ensure that those agreed upon risk responses are actually executed as planned by the designated risk owners. It's about transforming those strategic decisions we made in the planning phase into real-world actions. It emphasizes proactively addressing the overall project risk exposure, actively minimizing the identified threats before they bite, and aggressively maximizing the identified opportunities before they disappear, rather than just waiting passively for problems to occur and then reacting.
Okay, so making sure the doing gets done. What are the main inputs needed to kick this off?
The main input here is, logically, your updated risk register, because that's where all the detailed response plans, the specific actions to be taken, the trigger conditions for contingent actions, and crucially, the clearly nominated risk owners are documented. That's the action list.
Got it. The to-do list for risks. What about tools to help make it happen?
When it comes to tools for implementation, expert judgment is still vital. We often need to seek advice on the most efficient and effective way to execute a particular response. For instance, what's the best practical way to smoothly switch over to a backup supplier without disrupting things too much? Or how can we best expedite a critical task to enhance an opportunity for early finish? Experts can advise on the how-to.
Practical advice.
Practical advice. We also heavily rely on interpersonal and team skills, and specifically the skill of influencing. This is really crucial because often the required risk response actions are owned by people or departments who are actually outside the immediate project team, Or maybe the risk owner has other competing demands on their time.
Right, they have their regular job too.
Exactly. The project manager, or the person facilitating the risk process, needs to be able to effectively influence these individuals to ensure they understand the importance of the risk response action and actually take the necessary steps on time. This isn't about coercing people, but about building consensus, communicating the why, and fostering a shared commitment to managing the project's risks effectively.
So good communication and persuasion skills are key.
Very key. Additionally, a project management information system, PMIS, which could be anything from a simple shared spreadsheet to sophisticated project management software, often plays a key role. It helps by integrating these specific risk response activities directly into the project's overall work breakdown structure, the main project schedule, and the resource allocation plan. It helps track the progress of these actions alongside all the other project work and allocate resources efficiently to get them done.
Okay, so it's not just about telling people what to do, you're also actively making sure they actually do it, using influence and giving them the right tools and systems support to make it happen smoothly.
That's the goal. Ensuring execution follows planning.
What comes out of this implementation phase? How do you record what's been done and what its immediate impact is? What are the outputs?
The outputs really reflect the direct impact and the immediate consequences of taking these actions. Firstly, there might be further change requests generated.
More changes? Why?
Well, because sometimes during the implementation of a response, new information comes to light, or unanticipated challenges arise, or maybe the response doesn't work exactly as planned. This might necessitate further adjustments to the project's baselines, schedule, cost, scope, or other plans, which again need to go through the formal change control process.
Okay, reality bites sometimes.
Reality often bites. And critically, various project documents are updated as a result of these actions. The issue log will be updated to record any new problems or specific issues that arise during the implementation of the response itself. For example, maybe the backup supplier you switch to now has an unexpected quality issue that becomes a new issue to manage. The lessons learned register gets updated almost immediately to capture what worked well, or perhaps what didn't work so well, in implementing these specific responses. This provides invaluable real-time knowledge for the current project and for future ones, like our plan for using a backup costume vendor was effective in avoiding the delay, but we seriously underestimated the time needed for them to get set up and familiar with our requirements. Capture the learning right away, while it's fresh. And of course, the risk register and the risk report are continuously updated. They need to reflect the current status of the risks now that response actions have been put into motion. You might mark risks as closed if the response was successful, or update their status to mitigated or transferred, and importantly, reflect any new residual risks remaining or secondary risks that have emerged as a consequence of the actions taken. It's all about closing the loop, ensuring the actions taken are properly recorded, and their immediate effects are understood and documented for continuous learning and adaptation. This step is really where the theoretical what-if plan becomes the practical what is reality.
That makes perfect sense. It's all about putting those carefully crafted plans into motion, ensuring they actually lead to the desired outcomes, and meticulously documenting the journey, including any bumps along the way.
And that leads us directly into the final process, which is absolutely vital because, as we've said, projects are dynamic, complex systems. They are never static. Monitor risks is the continuous, ongoing process of keeping track of everything risk-related. It involves checking on how well those implemented responses are working, tracking the status of existing, identified risks, actively looking for and identifying any new risks that might be emerging, including those sneaky secondary risks created by our own responses, and systematically evaluating how effective our entire risk management process is proving to be throughout the project's life.
So it's like being a vigilant watchdog for the whole project.
Exactly. Or think of it like being the captain of a large ship navigating unpredictable waters. You're constantly checking the weather radar for storms, consulting the navigation map, monitoring the engine performance, checking the fuel levels, and maybe even listening for any unusual sounds that might indicate a problem with the hull's integrity.
Always scanning the horizon.
Always scanning. You want to know if the sails you put up, your risk responses, are actually working effectively, if there are new storms brewing on the horizon, new risks emerging, if your navigation system, your risk process, is still reliable, and if your crew, the risk owners, are effectively handling their responsibilities. This continuous monitoring allows for constant adaptation and proactive course correction before you hit an iceberg.
That's a great analogy. So even after we've meticulously planned and started implementing our responses, we're still keeping a close, vigilant watch. What inputs do you need to do this monitoring effectively and comprehensively? What information are you looking at?
You need several crucial inputs to maintain this effective oversight. Firstly, your risk management plan. The rulebook is key because it dictates how often and how risks should be reviewed, for example, weekly risk meetings, monthly audits. Your issue log is important too. It helps you see if any currently open issues are actually linked to risks that have materialized, or if new problems have emerged that might indicate a previously unidentified risk. The updated risk register and risk report are obviously central, as they provide the most current documented status of all individual risks and the overall project risk exposure that's your baseline for monitoring.
Okay. What else?
And crucially, you need work performance data. This is the raw, factual data about what's actually happening on the project related to risks. Things like, which specific risk responses have actually been implemented as planned? Which identified risks have unfortunately occurred? Which risks are still active and being watched? And which ones have been successfully closed out because a threat passed or the opportunity was realized? You also review work performance reports, which are more structured summaries and analyses of project progress, deviations, and forecasts, as these can provide broader insights into trends or areas of concern that might signal underlying risks.
Got it. Raw data and summarized reports. And what specific tools or techniques do you use to actually monitor everything effectively? How do you turn all that raw data and those reports into actionable insights for ongoing management?
We use various data analysis techniques again here. Technical performance analysis is one. This involves comparing the actual technical results being achieved by the project against the planned technical targets. For example, for that new smartphone development project, are we actually meeting the target battery life specs in testing? Is the processing speed hitting the required benchmarks? Any significant deviation can indicate that a technical risk is impacting performance, or perhaps that a response isn't working as expected, signaling the need for adjustment.
Okay, checking the actual results.
Checking the actual results against the plan.
Right.
Reserve analysis is also critical throughout monitoring. It's like constantly checking your bank balance against your expected remaining expenses during that big family trip.
Do we still have enough buffer?
Exactly. Reserve analysis compares the remaining contingency reserves, both time in the schedule buffer and money in the cost contingency fund, against the estimated risk exposure remaining in the project, both for identified risks and for the overall uncertainty. This helps determine if you still have enough buffer to absorb potential future shocks. If your analysis shows the remaining reserves are insufficient for the remaining risk, you might need to trigger a change request to get more reserves allocated, or perhaps develop more aggressive risk responses, or even de-scope parts of the project to reduce the risk exposure.
Okay, keeping an eye on the safety net.
Precisely. Risk audits are another vital tool for monitoring. These are structured, often formal, reviews conducted periodically to examine and document the effectiveness of your entire risk management process itself. They ask the hard questions. Are we actually doing this risk management thing well? Are our chosen methods and tools working effectively? Are we identifying the right kinds of risks early enough? Are our planned responses actually proving effective when implemented? These audits can be part of routine project review meetings, or sometimes they are separate dedicated sessions, perhaps even involving external auditors or experts to ensure objectivity and bring fresh perspectives.
So checking if the process itself is working.
Exactly. And perhaps the most important tool for day-to-day monitoring is meetings, specifically regularly scheduled risk reviews. These are the heartbeat of continuous risk management. They are regular, often frequent, maybe weekly or bi-weekly on complex projects. Scheduled gatherings where the project team and potentially key stakeholders formally review the current risk landscape.
What happens in these risk review meetings?
During these meetings, the team typically does several key things. They review the current status of all significant existing risks in the register. They formally close out risks that have either materialized and been dealt with or are no longer relevant for some reason. They reassess the probability, impact, or priority of current risks based on any new information or changing circumstances. Crucially, they actively try to identify any new risks that have emerged since the last review, including those subtle secondary risks that might have been generated by previous responses. And they capture important lessons learned about what risk responses work well, what didn't, and why, right there in real time while the experience is fresh.
So like a weekly health check for risks.
Exactly. For the school annual day committee, it would be like a weekly meeting where they specifically discuss, okay, is the costume vendor still on track? Or have the new backup supplier we switched to caused any unexpected quality issues? Any new concerns raised about the venue's power supply stability? Did the backup plan for the sound system work effectively last week during the full rehearsal, or do we need to refine it further? These regular focused reviews are absolutely essential for maintaining control and implementing effectively.
It sounds like it's all about making sure you stay agile, responsive, and always learning throughout the project's entire life cycle. What are the key outputs from this continuous monitoring? How does all this ongoing vigilance feed back into the project's success and maybe even help future projects?
The outputs are crucial for closing the loop and ensuring continuous improvement. Key outputs include work performance information. This is analyzed information showing how well your risk management activities are actually performing. For example, are we effectively identifying risks early? Are our responses reducing impact as expected? This provides feedback on the effectiveness of the process itself. New change requests. As monitoring uncovers new risks or reveals that existing responses aren't working, or shows that contingency reserves are inadequate, you'll frequently need to generate new change requests to get formal approval for necessary adjustments to the project plan, baselines, or resource allocations. New change requests. And of course, continuous updates to the project management plan and various project documents are absolutely essential. This includes updating the assumption log, if monitoring reveals previous assumptions were incorrect, the issue log, for materialized risks or new problems identified during monitoring, the lessons learned register, to document new insights, successful responses, failed responses, and best practices identified through monitoring, and most importantly, ongoing updates to the risk register and risk report. These updates ensure that your project's core risk documentation always reflects the most current risk status, learnings, and planned responses, providing a clear audit trail and informing ongoing decisions.
So the documents are always live.
They should be living documents. Finally, the insights gained from monitoring often lead to updates to the organizational process assets, OPAs. Things like your standard risk checklists, risk management plan templates, or even the structure of the risk breakdown structure itself might be refined based on the experience of this project, so that future projects within the organization can directly benefit from your experience and the lessons learned. This continuous cycle of monitoring, learning, adapting, and refining is what truly makes a project resilient and empowers a team to effectively master the unexpected.
That was an incredible journey through the 7 core processes of project risk management. It really gives you a solid framework. But just like, technology or medicine, risk management itself is always evolving, isn't it? Always finding new ways to understand and adapt to uncertainty.
Absolutely. The field is constantly developing, incorporating new ideas and techniques.
So, what does this all mean for the future of managing the unexpected? It seems to mean that risk management isn't just about preparing for the things you can clearly see coming, the known risks. It's also about building the inherent capability, the muscle, to respond effectively to things you can barely even imagine, the truly unknown unknowns, the black swan events.
That's a great way to put it, building the muscle.
Yeah, it's like learning to bat in cricket. You meticulously prepare for the known bowlers on the opposing team. You study their typical deliveries, their strengths, their weaknesses. But you also need to develop overall batting resilience, technique, and adaptability so you can react effectively to whatever unexpected delivery, however bizarre or unfamiliar, comes your way during the actual match. You need both specific preparation and general resilience.
Exactly. And the focus of project risk management is broadening significantly to reflect that. We're definitely moving beyond just focusing on what we traditionally called event-based risks.
Event-based? What do you mean?
Those are the discrete, uncertain future events that may or may not occur, like a key supplier going out of business, or a sudden power outage during a critical phase, or a specific piece of equipment failing. While identifying and managing those is still absolutely critical, the modern approach recognizes that uncertainty comes in other more nuanced forms as well.
Okay, what other forms?
There's an increasing recognition and focus on non-event risks. These aren't about something specific happening or it's happening, but rather about the inherent degree of uncertainty surrounding something planned, or uncertainty arising from a fundamental lack of knowledge. Our sources highlight 2 main types that really require different management approaches.
Okay.
First is variability risk. This is uncertainty about key characteristics of a planned event or activity, rather than uncertainty about the event itself occurring. It's not if something will happen, but rather how much, how long, how many, or to what extent.
Give me an example.
Sure. For building a house in India during the monsoon season, the risk isn't just if it will rain. It almost certainly will. The variability risk is about how many days it will actually rain heavily enough to stop work, how heavy that rainfall will be on any given day, or maybe how much productivity the construction workers will actually achieve in a given week, given the variable weather conditions or unpredictable labor availability. You know these things will vary, but you don't know by how much.
Ah, okay. Uncertainty in the numbers.
Exactly. These types of risks, the variability risks, are typically managed using statistical tools like Monte Carlo analysis, which we talked about earlier. That helps you understand the potential range of outcomes for schedule or cost, allowing for more robust planning and the setting of appropriate contingency reserves based on that quantified variability.
Okay, so that's variability. What's the other non-event type?
The second type is ambiguity risk. This is uncertainty about what might happen in the future that arises purely due to imperfect knowledge, lack of clarity, or inherent complexity in the situation. It's often about truly unknown future factors or future states where you just don't have enough information to even assign probabilities.
Like things you just don't know.
Things you genuinely don't know yet. For example, a new tech startup in India developing an innovative mobile payment app faces significant ambiguity risk regarding future government regulations on data privacy. What will the rules be in 2 years? They also face ambiguity about the rapid pace of technological change. Will a competitor launch something totally different next month? Or how quickly will user adoption trends shift in the dynamic Indian market? You can't easily put a probability on these future states.
So how do you manage ambiguity if you can't quantify it?
You manage ambiguity primarily by actively seeking to gain more knowledge and reduce the uncertainty over time. This involves things like conducting thorough market research, breaking down the project work into smaller, manageable iterations or experiments, building prototypes or running proof-of-concept projects to test assumptions early, and engaging external experts or consultants to fill knowledge gaps. Understanding the fundamental difference between variability, which you can often quantify and buffer against, and ambiguity, which you need to actively reduce through learning and adaptation, is really crucial because they demand different management strategies.
That's a really fascinating and useful distinction. It's like going from worrying, will it rain, event risk, to how heavy will the rain be, variability risk, and finally to what new government rules might come in next year about building near rivers, ambiguity risk.
Precisely. And that leads nicely into this increasingly important concept of project resilience. How does it fit into navigating these deeper, often unknowable uncertainties?
Yeah, tell me more about resilience.
Yes, project resilience is really about building the inherent capacity of a project system, the team, the processes, the structure, to effectively deal with those unknowable unknowns. These are the risks that are so unexpected, maybe even unprecedented, that they can only be recognized and understood after they have already occurred. Think of the global pandemic, for instance.
Right, nobody saw that coming exactly like it did.
Exactly. Or think of a city planning for a major natural disaster, like a sudden, unprecedented flash flood or an unexpected earthquake hitting a region not known for seismic activity. They can't plan for the exact timing or magnitude of that specific event, but they can build resilience into their emergency response systems.
How do you build that resilience?
It requires several key elements working together. Having the right level of budget and schedule contingency, maybe even beyond what's calculated just for known or quantifiable risks. Having flexible reserves specifically earmarked for the truly unexpected black swan events, implementing flexible processes that can quickly adapt to unforeseen circumstances rather than relying on rigid, unchangeable plans that shatter when reality deviates. Having an empowered project team, a team that is well-trained, trusted by leadership, and empowered to make quick, informed decisions right there on the ground when the unexpected inevitably hits, without having to wait for multiple layers of bureaucratic approval, which wastes precious time. Conducting frequent reviews of early warning signs, constantly scanning the project's internal and external environment for subtle shifts, anomalies, or weak signals that might hint at a potential emerging unprecedented issue before it fully blows up.
And maintaining very clear stakeholder input and communication channels so that scope, priorities, or strategy can be rapidly adjusted in collaboration with key decision makers when significant unforeseen events fundamentally change the game. It's really about building a project system that can absorb shocks, adapt quickly, and recover rapidly, rather than just focusing solely on preventing known problems from happening.
Right. Building that shock absorber into the project.
Exactly. And finally, another major trend our sources highlight is the move towards integrated risk management.
Integrated meaning?
Meaning recognizing that projects don't exist in a vacuum or an isolated bubble. They're almost always part of a larger organizational ecosystem. They might be nested within broader programs, or part of a large portfolio of projects, all competing for resources and attention. Risk exists at all these different levels: project, program, portfolio, even enterprise-wide strategic risk.
Okay.
Integrated risk management means that risks should ideally be identified, assessed, owned, and managed at the most appropriate organizational level where they can be dealt with most effectively. For example, some risks identified within a single local construction project, like say a critical delay in getting a specific type of imported building material because of a global supply chain issue, might actually be so significant that they impact the entire national construction program the project is part of, affecting multiple other projects and potentially even the organization's overall strategic goals or reputation.
So too big for the local team to handle alone.
Precisely. Such a risk would need to be formally escalated from the project level to a higher organizational level, maybe the program manager or a central procurement department or even the CEO's office, for management and response, as it's outside the individual project manager's scope and authority to resolve. This coordinated, integrated approach across the entire enterprise ensures consistency in risk approaches, alignment of risk appetites and tolerances, avoids wasteful duplication of effort, and ultimately maximizes overall organizational value by managing risks more strategically across the entire portfolio, not just within individual project silos.
That makes so much sense. It's like coordinating defense across the whole army, not just within individual platoons. It's like a family. Some issues are for your parents to handle, some are for you to handle yourself, and some need everyone in the family to work together to solve.
Excellent analogy. It's
Yeah.
about managing risk at the right level.
So it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach then, is it? It seems like this whole risk management process needs to be carefully customized or tailored for each situation.
Absolutely. Tailoring considerations are absolutely crucial. Risk management is definitively not a rigid one-size-fits-all methodology that you blindly apply in exactly the same way to every single undertaking. That would be incredibly inefficient and often ineffective. You must adjust and tailor your risk management approach based on the specific characteristics and context of your project.
What kind of characteristics?
For instance, project size. Obviously, a small school project like organizing a class picnic to Lodi Garden will have a much simpler, less formal risk process, maybe just a quick brainstorm and a checklist, compared to building a massive new international airport or launching a complex ISRO satellite mission, which would require extremely rigorous, detailed, and formal risk management. Project complexity. A relatively simple home renovation project, while certainly having its own set of risks, is inherently far less complex than, say, building a completely new type of innovative drone using cutting-edge, untested AI technology. The latter requires a much more robust, detailed, and probably quantitative risk approach due to the high levels of innovation, uncertainty, and potentially unknown interactions between new components. Project importance or strategic significance. A project deemed critical national infrastructure, like constructing a new nuclear power plant, naturally demands exceptionally high levels of scrutiny, redundancy, and rigorous risk management compared to, say, developing a small internal training session for just a few employees within a company. The potential consequences of failure are vastly different, so the risk effort must be proportionate. Project importance or strategic significance. And importantly, the development approach being used also heavily influences how you tailor risk management. The way you manage risk will differ significantly depending on whether you're using a traditional waterfall approach, where you try to plan everything upfront in detail, step by step, or a more modern agile approach, which is iterative, flexible, and expects change.
Right. How does it work differently in agile projects then? They seem built for uncertainty.
They are. In agile adaptive environments, where there's inherently high uncertainty and frequent change is not just expected, but often welcomed as a way to deliver better value, risk management is managed in a very integrated, iterative, and continuous way. These projects almost thrive on navigating uncertainty.
How do they do it?
They typically use techniques like frequent reviews of small increments of working product, for example, at the end of every 2-week sprint, cross-functional teams sitting together to accelerate knowledge sharing and problem solving, and maintaining requirements in a flexible backlog that gets regularly updated and reprioritized. Risk isn't treated as a separate large activity done only at the beginning. Instead, risk is constantly considered implicitly or explicitly when the team selects which features to work on in the very next short iteration or sprint. Potential risks associated with those features are identified, analyzed, and managed collaboratively during each short iteration itself, often through daily stand-up meetings or weekly reviews.
So risk management is baked into the daily work.
It's much more baked into the regular rhythm of the project. Requirements are treated as living documents in the backlog and are updated regularly based on feedback and learning, allowing the planned work to be continuously reprioritized based on an improved understanding of the current risk exposure and any newly emergent opportunities. Think about developing a new online learning platform using an agile approach. You're constantly getting feedback from actual students and teachers using early versions. You're releasing small updates and new features every few weeks, and you're adjusting the platform's features and direction based on what users actually need and how the market is evolving. You're effectively managing risks, like building the wrong feature, and seizing opportunities, like a new user request, every single step of the way, rather than trying to plan the entire platform perfectly from day one based on potentially flawed initial assumptions. This continuous feedback loop and built-in adaptation are absolutely key to managing risk effectively in highly uncertain or rapidly changing environments. #outro.
Wow, what an incredible deep dive. That was really comprehensive. We've truly unpacked the many layers of mastering the unexpected, haven't we? From figuring out your fundamental risk comfort zone, your appetite,
Setting the baseline.
to diligently identifying those potential curveballs, remembering both the threats and those hidden opportunities, then prioritizing them, having a clear, actionable plan for the important ones, implementing those plans, and continually monitoring and adapting along the way.
It's full life cycle.
It really is. And the key takeaway seems to be, remember, it's all about making smart, informed choices proactively so that your efforts, whether they're big projects or small personal goals, have the best possible chance of being a roaring success. From organizing that school play we talked about, to building a house, or even launching a tech startup in somewhere like Bangalore, understanding these principles of product risk management doesn't just give you a slight advantage. It genuinely gives you a powerful strategic edge.
It really does. And this raises, I think, an important final question for everyone listening. Now that you understand these systematic steps, this way of thinking, to manage risks within a defined project, how might you apply this powerful thinking to other areas of your own life?
Interesting question. Like where?
Well, perhaps when you're planning your future career trajectory, or making significant choices about your future studies, which course to take, which college to apply to, maybe even when making major investment decisions or planning your personal finances.
Yeah, those all have uncertainties.
They absolutely do. The core principles of project risk management, identifying uncertainties, assessing them, planning responses, monitoring too, they aren't just for big corporations running multi-core projects. They are truly universal, powerful tools for anyone wanting to navigate life's inherent uncertainties with greater clarity and confidence. They help you transform challenges into valuable learning experiences and actively turn potential problems or setbacks into genuine opportunities for growth and success. It's really about fostering a proactive mindset rather than just being passively reactive to whatever life throws at you.
Indeed. That's a great perspective. So the next time you, our listener, are facing a significant challenge, or maybe dreaming really big about something you want to achieve, whether it's acing those competitive entrance exams, organizing a massive family reunion back in your hometown, or even just deciding which important new skill you want to learn next, remember these tools and this way of thinking.
Pause and consider the risks and opportunities.
Exactly. Ask yourself, how might you approach that challenge or that big dream differently now? What unexpected opportunity might you be able to discover and exploit? Or what potential pitfall might you be able to smoothly navigate around simply by thinking a little differently, a little more systematically about what could happen, both good and bad, and what you'll proactively do about it? You really do have the capacity within you with this kind of thinking to master the unexpected.